Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. In today's episode, we're continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and its Ukrainian proxy forces. Now, today specifically, I want to have a look at a fairly interesting story that I recently observed. It was in reference to a Ukrainian soldier, and this Ukrainian soldier was conscripted into the Ukrainian army. He was forced to join the Ukrainian military, as are thousands of old Ukrainian males over the age of 25. And it's a very interesting system that the Ukrainians are using to garner soldiers for this conflict. Obviously, they do incorporate mercenaries from other nation states, and they receive significant assistance from the NATO bloc as well, obviously. But more importantly, this specific instance, this was a father, quite possibly a grandfather. He was 57 years old. And the story essentially has a look at his time in the Ukrainian army. Now, that time in the Ukrainian army was about 5 weeks. 5 weeks. So this 57-year-old man is forcibly drafted into the Ukrainian army. He didn't volunteer. He's 57 years old. I'm in my 50s. Unless a foreign nation state was invading, crossing the border, it's tough for 50, 60-year-old men to pick up a rifle and have the physical ability that, say, an 18-year-old does. Not only that, your younger males tend to be fearless as well. I mean, think about when you were a youth, when you were 18, 19, 20 years old, maybe in the military, your perspective was probably quite a bit different in what you were willing to do, the risk that you were willing to take, versus maybe what you're willing to take now. So think about that for a second. And keep in mind the philosophy that the Ukrainian military is using to conscript these troops. And one of the reasons, is that they feel that if they draft too early, those young men will not have the ability to have children. So what they're looking for is essentially to keep their birth rate up. They want these young men to have children, and then after they have children, they then draft them after the age of 25. And the conscription age was even older just several months ago. But nonetheless, this 57-year-old man is drafted into the Ukrainian military. He gets about 4 weeks of military training. 4 weeks of military training. Now, in all likelihood, given the fact that he's 57 years old, he may have had to do service in the Soviet military. So he may have that 1 year or 2 years or whatever the Soviet conscription laws existed at the time. So he probably has some concept of what basic military operations look like. But nonetheless, 57 years old is still very old to be drafting someone into your army. So he gets drafted into the army, and he is sent to the front lines. He is sent to the Donbass. And his wife stops hearing from him after about a week. He tells his wife, "Hey, I'm heading to the front. I'm probably not going to be able to reach out and contact you for about 5 days." So 5 days come and go, and then 6 days, 7, and she still hasn't heard from her husband, this 57-year-old forcibly conscripted soldier in the Ukrainian military. How old is Volodymyr Zelensky? How much military time has he done? I'm sure it's pretty. He hasn't done any military time. But he's an actor, right? I mean, he could probably portray a Ukrainian soldier in a film, maybe. Probably do an okay job. I don't know. Hard to say. But anyway, I guess Zelensky has never done military service, and yet much younger than this 57-year-old man, and this 57-year-old man is sent off the war. And So now he's declared missing. In all probability, he was killed in a Russian artillery barrage. That's what they think happened. 57 years old. The average age of a Ukrainian soldier is in his mid-40s. The average age. And I've talked about this forcible conscription policy that is going on, where they quite literally Shanghai you off the street, take you, press you into service, and there you go. You're sent to the front after about 4 weeks of training. Even if you're 50 years old, it looks like there's not a period of conditioning or anything like that to kind of get you battle ready. Battle ready shape doesn't exist. Now, there's another issue that's coming into play, and I want to talk about this. And I think it's important, and I think it's really reprehensible that, let's get over here, this guy, Denny Davidov. You guys familiar with this guy? He's a Ukrainian war analyst. He was a pilot in the Ukrainian airlines prior to the conflict. Obviously, he lost his job after the conflict started. He remained in the Ukraine. He alleges that he tried to enter Ukrainian military service at the start of the war, but because he lacked military experience, they wouldn't take him. Now, come on. That is nonsensical. That is one of the most nonsensical things I've ever heard. Look, everybody knows that if you're going to... Most people who join the military do not have prior military training. But he does have skill sets. He was a pilot. And in this age of drone warfare, he could be used in the training or be used as a drone operator. But that's what he claims. Now, in 2023, he gets in his car with his family and he flees to Western Europe. Why does he do this? Why does this guy do this? Well, he did this because he was going to be conscripted. So he claims he couldn't join the military in 2022 because he had no experience. And now 2023 rolls around and the Ukrainian military wants him. But he's making a lot of money on YouTube. I've heard one report just in Patreon alone, he was making up to $45,000 a month. $45,000 a month. And by and far, his listeners come from the United States. And I don't think many in the United States who listen to this guy understand that in all probability this guy is wanted by the Ukrainian state for the avoidance of Ukrainian conscription laws. I understand he also tried to come to the United States, but because of some background issues, he wasn't able to do that. So he couldn't even come to the United States. So my understanding now, he's someplace in Western Europe. Someone can probably know where he's at, but he's making a cubic shit ton of money on YouTube and Patreon, being a leading analyst, and he has no military experience. He has avoided Ukrainian service, and he's making money. He's profiteering off the war, while at the same time avoiding military service. I don't know if he'll ever be able to go back to the Ukraine. Tough to say at this point. I would imagine the Ukraine in its in all its magnificent corruption would want a piece of that pie, that revenue that Mr. Davidov is making. So I don't believe at this point Mr. Davidov is going back to the Ukraine anytime soon. But again, profiteering off his website, off his YouTube channel, while at the same time supporting the Ukrainian cause, but clearly, completely avoiding the actual Ukrainian cause by not going to fight as he has been requested by the Ukrainian state. However, he's probably, in his 30s, mid-30s, late 30s at best. I mean, he's below the average fighting age of the average Ukrainian soldier. He's over 25, so he could absolutely serve his nation state. He could certainly serve the borderlands in their struggle against quote-unquote Russian aggression, right? But apparently not. Apparently not. He is going to profiteer off this conflict, as 57-year-old grandfathers are killed and wounded in this ongoing war, as they are pressed into service. How old is Zelensky? Is he even in his 40s? Maybe. Probably. I don't know. But again, same thing. Same concept. Yep. Incredible. But again, 57-year-old men pressed into service, forced to fight. Average lifespan is about 4 to 5 weeks once they get to the front, if that. In that one case that I just talked about, 4 to 5 weeks. 4 weeks of training, he lasted a week. This 57-year-old man lasted a week. And there's thousands upon thousands of these kind of cases, and it's very unfortunate, and it's really strange. Again, if you look back in history at what traditional nations did in terms of the conscription of forces, usually you were, here in the United States, selective service, you register when you're 18 years old, when you get out of high school, for selective service, and there's a reason behind that. There's a reason the military wants 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old males in their militaries. One, it's the risk tolerance. There's less of it. And two, they tend to be in better shape. They tend to be in a little bit better shape than older men. And that's why they do it. But the Ukraine is doing something a little different. 25 is the minimum conscription age. Very strange. If I look back, like my grandfather was drafted. He actually wasn't drafted. He was going to be drafted, and he ended up joining the Coast Guard. He had worked for IBM for a number of years. That was back when you got out of high school. You didn't have to have advanced degrees. These businesses would train you. So he's 24 years old, and he joins the Coast Guard, and he ends up getting augmented to the U.S. Navy, and he served on a destroyer escort running convoys from Boston to Murmansk, Russia. And he did that for the entirety of the war, and again, drafted in his mid-20s. I keep saying that he was drafted, but he wasn't. He actually joined. He was going to be drafted. But yeah, again, this guy slays me. I tell you. Tens of $1,000s a month, and are mostly Americans that are listening to this cat. And this guy avoided conflict, avoided service. He's probably wanted by the Ukrainian military, by the Ukrainian state. He can never go back. And then people listen to this guy as if he's some sort of Ukrainian patriot. He's the patriot of the borderlands, right? But he's not. He's not. He's a war profiteer. So that's my take on it. And just watching what is happening with these older Ukrainian males that are being drafted into service, it's really reprehensible. But that does it for today. More to come very, very soon. As always, thanks for joining us. Good day.